I still remember the sound of the door slamming behind Clare Whitford that night. It wasn't just a door shutting, it was a life ending. A cold February wind swept through the hallway as Nathan Cole pushed her out, his voice dripping with the confidence of a man who thought he'd traded up in life. Clare, barely 26 and trembling, stood on the concrete steps with nothing but a thin coat, a paper bag of clothes, and the life growing inside her. She was 2 months pregnant. Her hands instinctively held her stomach as if shielding the baby from the cruelty she couldn't shield herself from. Nathan didn't even look at her. He just muttered something about new beginnings and how Elena Pierce, his mistress, understood him better. I had seen heartbreak before, but that night felt like the world was teaching us something brutal. Clare wasn't crying, not yet. She just stared at the glowing windows of the apartment they once shared, the place where they had dreamed of a family, a future, a home. Dreams dissolve fast when betrayal is involved. It struck me how quickly life can turn. One moment you're choosing baby names, the next you're dropped on the street like you were never part of the story. I think that's the part that haunted me most. How easy it was for Nathan to discard her. How certain he was that she would fail without him. Back then, she looked so fragile that anyone would have believed he was right. But life has a strange way of circling back. Sometimes the people you bury come back standing taller than you ever imagined. And sometimes the ones who walk away smugly eventually learn what it means to lose everything. That night, Clare whispered one sentence into the dark, a sentence I didn't understand until years later. "He'll regret this." And none of us knew how soon the first crack in Nathan's perfect world would appear. When people meet Clare Whitford today, they see the calm strength first. The poised woman who speaks softly but carries an inner force you can feel from across the room. But back then, before the jet, before the quiet confidence, before the success that made her name echo in conference rooms, she was just a young woman who loved too deeply and trusted too easily. Clare grew up in a foster home outside Columbus, Ohio, a place where hand-me-down blankets and secondhand stories shaped her childhood. She never knew her biological parents, only the rumor that her mother had been bright, warm, and too gentle for the world. Maybe that's why Clare always wanted a family of her own, something permanent, something she could hold on to. She wasn't chasing wealth or glamour, she just wanted to be loved without conditions. By the time she met Nathan Cole, she had moved to New York and worked as an administrative assistant at a small accounting firm. It wasn't glamorous. Her days were filled with spreadsheets, coffee rings on paperwork, and the hum of old printers. But she took pride in her work. She believed that showing up, doing things right, meant something. She believed loyalty mattered. Nathan seemed like the answer to every dream she secretly held. Charming, ambitious, full of promises spoken with that easy smile of his. I still remember how she looked at him like he was the beginning of a new life. She supported him, believed in him, even when he didn't deserve it, paid his overdue bills, cooked dinner after long days, encouraged him through every setback. She built him up in ways he never acknowledged. And maybe that's why her downfall felt so cruel. She wasn't naive, she wasn't weak, she was simply a woman who loved someone who didn't know the meaning of love. Pregnancy should have been her blessing, her moment of joy. Instead, it became her vulnerability, the leverage he used to push her out. That was the part that angered me most. She thought the baby would bring them closer, not reveal how far apart they already were. What people don't understand is that Clare's strength didn't come from surviving the betrayal. It came from what came after those quiet nights where she had to decide whether to give up or fight for a future that still felt impossible. And it came from the tiny heartbeat inside her, the one reason she couldn't shatter completely. Even then, as she stood alone in the cold, she didn't know her greatest transformation had already begun. Because the next morning, Clare would discover a secret about Nathan that changed everything. New York City has a way of swallowing people whole, especially those who arrive without a safety net. Clare Whitford learned that quickly. Before everything collapsed, she and Nathan lived in a modest but bright apartment on the Upper West Side. Nothing fancy, just a one-bedroom with creaky floors, warm morning light, and a view of trees in Riverside Park if you leaned far enough out the window. For Clare, it was the first place that ever felt like hers. She painted the kitchen blue, bought secondhand bookshelves, and kept fresh flowers on the tiny dining table because she believed a home should feel alive. Nathan used to love that about her. or at least pretended to. He would kiss her on the forehead while she cooked dinner in their cramped kitchen, promising someday they'd trade the small apartment for a high-rise condo overlooking Manhattan's skyline. Back then, Claire believed him. Back then, everything felt possible. But even in those early days, New York had already begun shaping their relationship. Nathan worked in a competitive marketing firm in Midtown, a place where ambition hung in the air like cologne, and everyone pretended to be richer than they actually were. He came home late more often, carrying the scent of rooftop bars and expensive perfumes Claire didn't wear. She tried not to notice. Love makes you forgive things that should never be forgiven. As his world grew bigger, theirs grew smaller. Nathan wanted the luxury, the parties, the high-rise life he'd bragged about. Claire wanted stability, a family, a quiet life built on honesty. They were living in the same apartment but dreaming in different languages. Still, that apartment was where she learned she was pregnant. She remembered sitting on the bathroom floor, hands shaking as the test turned positive. She had cried not out of fear, but joy. She imagined a crib by the window, tiny socks in the dresser, a future where Nathan softened at the sight of their child. But New York City doesn't soften for anyone, and neither did Nathan. When he threw her out that night, the city around her felt unrecognizable. The lights were too bright, the street too loud, the cold too sharp. Everything she once loved became a reminder of what she'd lost. Yet even as she stood there shivering, I believe the city was already rearranging itself for her comeback. New York has a funny way of giving second chances to the people who refuse to die quietly. And Claire was about to meet someone who would change the course of her entire future. Every story of betrayal has two shadows, the one who commits the wound and the one who whispers how to make it deeper. Nathan Cole was the first shadow, smooth, ambitious, and terrified of being ordinary. But the second shadow, the one who carved the real lines of destruction, was Elena Pierce. I had seen Elena before Claire ever suspected her. She worked in the same marketing firm as Nathan, always arriving a little too polished, laughing a little too loudly, standing a little too close. Elena wasn't one of those dramatic villains people imagine. No, she was the subtle kind, the type who compliments you while she's studying your weaknesses, the type who smiles as she takes what isn't hers. Her greatest skill was making people believe she was harmless. Nathan fell for her instantly, not because she was better than Claire, but because she fed the part of him that could never be satisfied. She told him he deserved more success, more attention, more luxury, more admiration. And he believed her. Men like Nathan always believe the person who tells them they're extraordinary. I'll never forget the day I overheard Elena telling a coworker, "Claire thinks having a baby will slow him down. Nathan belongs in a different league." That was months before the breakup. The seed had already been planted. Nathan started pulling away from Claire soon after. His excuses multiplied, his affection faded, his temper sharpened. He blamed stress, blamed work, even blamed Claire for not understanding him anymore. But the truth was simple. He was already halfway out the door, following Elena into a world he believed was shinier, richer, more deserving of him. And yet, for all her calculation, I don't think Elena ever expected Claire to fight back. She saw Claire as fragile, someone who would simply disappear once she was pushed aside. She didn't understand that some women only break so they can rebuild stronger. Nathan and Elena convinced themselves the betrayal would be clean. Quick, no consequences. No guilt, but people who act without conscience forget something important. Life keeps receipts. The night Nathan chose Elena over Claire wasn't the beginning of their victory, it was the beginning of their unraveling. And they didn't even know it. Because the very next day, Elena would make one reckless mistake that exposed everything they tried to hide. Humiliation has a smell. I don't think people talk about that enough. It lingers on the skin, crawls under your clothes, settles in your bones. Claire learned that the hard way the morning after Nathan pushed her out. She had gone back not to beg, but to retrieve her medical file and the last of her belongings. She needed prenatal documents for her next checkup. She needed closure. She needed something that still belonged to her. But when she reached the lobby of Nathan's building, the world turned sharp. Elena was already there. She was dressed in a silk red blouse, holding Nathan's arm like she'd been doing it for years. She laughed at something he whispered, the high, brittle sound cutting through the quiet morning like glass. For a moment, Claire froze. Her bruised heart still wanted to believe this was all a misunderstanding, that Nathan couldn't possibly be this cruel, that Elena wasn't replacing her publicly the very next day. But then Nathan looked at Clare with a coldness so practiced it startled even me, as though she were a stranger interrupting his life. "What are you doing here?" he asked, loud enough for the lobby staff to hear. We agreed everything was over. Elena tilted her head, eyes glittering with triumph. "Nathan, let's not cause a scene. She's obviously emotional." Emotional. The word hit Clare harder than the winter wind outside. She wasn't crying, she wasn't shouting. She was just standing there, one hand on her stomach, trying to keep her breathing steady. But Elena's smirk made her feel small, like she was begging for scraps of dignity. Clare managed, "I just need my medical paperwork. That's it." Nathan shrugged. "Elena organized everything already. Whatever was left of yours has been thrown out. You should move on." Thrown out? Like trash? The doorman looked away. The receptionist pretended to type. People walking through the lobby slowed, watching the scene unfold with the hunger of strangers who love a little drama. I saw Claire's fingers tremble, but her eyes did something remarkable. They hardened. Not with anger, not with sadness, but with a clarity I'd never seen before. Something in her broke that moment, but something else woke up. Nathan leaned closer, lowering his voice just enough. "You'll be fine, Clare. Women like you always land somewhere. Just not back here." He expected her to shatter. Instead, she whispered, "You have no idea what you've started." Because that very afternoon, Clare would receive a phone call that changed her fate forever. People think heartbreak makes noise, shouting, broken plates, slammed doors, but Clare's collapse was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that makes you afraid to breathe. After the humiliation in the lobby, she wandered through the city without knowing where her feet were taking her. The February air stung her cheeks, and every step felt heavier, as if the baby inside her absorbed the weight of her sorrow. She went to a small public restroom near Riverside Park, a place she used to stop at during evening walks with Nathan. Now, it felt like enemy territory. She splashed cold water on her face, trying to swallow the grief that kept rising in her throat. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Her hair was messy, her coat thin, her eyes swollen with exhaustion, but what struck her most was how invisible she looked. Like a woman fading out of her own life. That's when the nausea hit. She dropped to her knees, one hand gripping the sink, the other protectively covering her stomach. Panic surged through her. What if the stress was hurting the baby? What if she had nowhere to go, no one to call? She tried calling the free clinic, but the line was busy. She tried calling the women's shelter, but all rooms were full. She didn't dare call Nathan. She knew exactly what he'd say. Something cold. Something final. Something that would leave another bruise on her spirit. By the time she reached the bus stop, the sky had turned a dull gray. Snow began to fall, soft and quiet, almost mocking her trembling breaths. She sat on the metal bench, hugging herself as strangers walked by, bundled in warm coats and thick scarves. None of them knew she was falling apart. None of them knew she carried a child whose heartbeat was the only reason she hadn't given up. And I'll admit this, watching her struggle like that, it broke something in me too. Life shouldn't hit someone all at once like that. But it does. And it did. When the bus finally arrived, Clare didn't get on. She couldn't. Her legs felt frozen, her mind spinning. She whispered into the cold air, "I'm trying. I really am." And maybe the world finally heard her. Because just as she stood to leave, her phone buzzed with a call she didn't recognize, yet one that would shift the entire direction of her life. It was from a man she'd never met, but who somehow already knew her name. The unknown number flashed again on Clare's cracked phone screen. Normally she wouldn't answer too many debt collectors, too many reminders of everything slipping through her fingers. But something in her chest nudged her to pick up. Maybe hope, maybe desperation, maybe both. "Hello?" Her voice was thin, barely audible over the wind. A warm male voice responded, steady and professional. "Miss Clare Whitford? My name is Daniel Marks. I'm calling on behalf of Mercer Capital." The name hit her like a jolt. Mercer Capital, one of the biggest private investment firms in the country. She had seen their logo on skyscrapers and luxury event invitations she used to help organize at work. People like her didn't get calls from places like that. I "I think you have the wrong person," she whispered. Daniel chuckled softly. "No mistake. Your freelance tax review was forwarded to our department." Mr. Mercer was impressed. She blinked, stunned. The project she rushed through last week, the one she completed on a borrowed laptop in a shelter common room, had somehow reached the hands of Julian Mercer, a man known for transforming struggling companies into empires. Claire wiped her eyes, unsure whether to laugh or cry. "I didn't know anyone important would see it," she said quietly. "Quality finds its way," Daniel replied. "Mr. Mercer would like to meet with you, today, if possible." Today, she had no home, no proper clothes, no strength left, but she had her mind. That was one thing Nathan never managed to take from her. Claire hesitated. "I'm not in a good place right now." "Miss Whitford," Daniel said gently, "you don't need to be. Just show up. The work will speak for itself." Maybe it was foolish, maybe it was fate, but Claire forced herself to stand, brushing snow from her coat. For the first time in days, her heartbeat didn't feel like a countdown. It felt like a beginning. She arrived at the small cafe, Daniel suggested, hands trembling, stomach twisting. She expected a receptionist, maybe a junior associate. Instead, seated at a corner table with a laptop and a cup of black coffee, was Julian Mercer himself. The billionaire. The man whose decisions shaped entire industries. He looked up and smiled warmly, not with pity, but recognition. "Clare Whitford," he said as if greeting an equal. "Sit, we have a lot to talk about." And in that moment, I knew her life had taken a turn no one, not even Nathan, could have predicted. Because Julian wasn't offering her a job. He was offering her a way out. Julian Mercer had the kind of presence that silenced a room without saying a word. Yet when Claire sat across from him, shivering slightly in her worn coat, he didn't look at her the way wealthy men often look at people who have nothing. There was no arrogance, no judgment, only curiosity and something like respect. "I read your report 3 times, Julian said, tapping the folder beside him. "You caught errors my entire team missed." Claire stared at the table. "It was just basic analysis." "No," he corrected gently, "it was exceptional analysis." For a moment, she couldn't speak. For months, every word thrown at her had been an accusation or an insult. Hearing praise felt foreign, like touching something fragile that might break if she believed in it too quickly. Julian leaned back. "Where did you learn to read financial patterns like that?" "I taught myself." She felt embarrassed admitting it. "Online courses, borrowed textbooks, anything I could find." He raised his eyebrows in genuine surprise. "And you did that while pregnant? On your own?" Her throat tightened. She nodded. Julian closed his laptop. "Then you're exactly the kind of mind I want around me. People who know how to survive usually know how to solve problems." His words struck a place inside her she didn't know was still alive. Not because he was offering her opportunity, but because he saw her not as broken, not as abandoned, but as capable. He slid a business card across the table. "I'd like to hire you on a trial basis, flexible hours, remote work. I'll send equipment, software, whatever you need." He paused, studying her carefully. "If you say yes?" Claire's hands trembled as she picked up the card. Mercer Capital, one of the most powerful firms in the country. And here she was, coated in the scent of cold wind and survival, being invited into a world she thought was closed to people like her. "Why me?" she whispered. Julian smiled slightly. "Because talent doesn't care about circumstances, and neither do I." For the first time since Nathan pushed her into the cold, Claire felt warmth that wasn't borrowed from a thin coat or a dying sense of hope. She felt possibility. She accepted, and everything changed. That week, a brand new laptop arrived at the shelter. Julian's assistant sent training modules and private access codes. Claire worked at night, her baby kicking softly as if cheering her on. Her confidence grew with every file she analyzed, every strategy she helped refine. She didn't know it yet, but the woman she was becoming terrified Nathan far more than the woman he betrayed. Because soon, Claire's talent would expose a secret inside Nathan's company, one that could destroy him completely. Success rarely arrives loudly. Sometimes it comes in the form of a single spreadsheet, a quiet realization, a pattern. Only one person in the room is brave enough to question. For Claire, it happened late one night in the shelter's dimly lit common room. her newborn son sleeping beside her in a donated bassinet. The glow of her new Mercer Capital laptop illuminated her tired eyes as she worked through a complex financial audit Julian had assigned. At first, she thought she was mistaken. The inconsistencies were subtle, misplaced decimals, overstated revenue, strange vendor payments that didn't match any legitimate service. She rechecked her calculations again and again. But the truth only sharpened. Someone in Nathan's firm was manipulating numbers. Badly, the realization hit with a mix of dread and something like vindication. She had lived with Nathan, listened to his late-night rants about pressure, status, image. She knew he wasn't the type to resist cutting corners if it made him look successful. Still, Clare never imagined the situation was this dire. She compiled her findings with careful precision. When she sent her report to Julian, she expected a simple acknowledgement. Instead, he called her immediately. "Clare," he said, his voice unusually serious, "you're sure about these numbers?" "Yes," she whispered, rocking her baby gently. "I checked everything." There was silence on the line, the kind that told her this wasn't a small discovery. This was something big, something that could change the trajectory of companies and careers. Julian finally spoke. "The firm you analyzed just applied for a partnership with Mercer Capital. If what you found is accurate, they're in deep trouble, and you may have just saved us millions." Clare felt a strange swirl of emotions, fear, relief, and a rising confidence she hadn't felt in years. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was proving herself, not by shouting, not by begging, but through her intelligence, through her work. Julian continued, "I want you on my internal review team. This is no longer a trial assignment. Consider this an official invitation." She couldn't stop the tears, not of sadness this time, but of arrival. For the first time, she wasn't the woman left on a sidewalk in the cold. She was a woman being welcomed into a world she built her way into, one calculation at a time. And somewhere across the city, Nathan had no idea that the person unraveling the future he clung to wasn't his competition, his colleagues, or the market. It was the wife he threw away. And soon, he would learn exactly how much power she now held and who she was working for. While Clare slowly rebuilt her life, Nathan Cole's world began to rot from the inside out. At first, the cracks were small, missed emails, tense meetings, partners asking uncomfortable questions about quarterly reports. Nathan brushed it off. He had always been able to talk himself out of trouble. He believed charm and confidence were enough to keep his world standing. But arrogance is a fragile shield. One Thursday morning, Nathan arrived at his office to find two senior partners waiting for him in the conference room. Elena was beside him, pretending calm, though her foot tapped anxiously beneath the glossy table. Nathan greeted them with forced confidence, but the air felt colder than usual. "Let's get to the point," one partner said. "The numbers aren't adding up. We received a notice from Mercer Capital. They found discrepancies in our financials." Nathan's blood froze. He had feared discovery, but he never imagined someone as influential as Mercer Capital would be involved. His mind raced. How had they found out? Who had tipped them off? He glanced at Elena, but she avoided his eyes. "We expect full transparency," another partner added. "If we don't receive answers, your position here is in jeopardy." Jeopardy. A word Nathan never believed would apply to him. That afternoon, Nathan tore through his office, searching for explanations, excuses, anything he could use as a shield. Elena finally spoke up, her voice sharp and impatient. "You said you handled everything. You told me we were safe." "Don't put this on me," Nathan snapped. "If they found something, someone exposed us." "Who?" Elena hissed. "Who would even know how to read the numbers that way?" At that moment, a terrible suspicion crawled through Nathan's mind. Clare. But it couldn't be. She was gone, broken, struggling, barely surviving. She didn't have the resources or knowledge to unravel his mistakes, right? Yet the timing, the precision of the discovery, the sudden involvement of a major firm, it all fit too neatly. Nathan suddenly felt something he hadn't felt in years. Fear. He loosened his tie, struggling to breathe. Elena stepped back, as if sensing his unraveling. That evening, alone in his apartment, Nathan poured himself a drink and stared at the city lights. He told himself Clare couldn't possibly touch him. She had no power, no connections. She was finished. But the fear didn't go away. because deep down, he knew something was coming, something he couldn't control. And he would soon learn that the woman he discarded was now working directly under the man who could destroy him. Transformation doesn't happen in a single moment. It happens in the small, stubborn choices a person makes every day. For Clare, it began in that tiny shelter room where she balanced a newborn on her lap and financial reports on her screen. Weeks passed, and her skills sharpened like a blade. Julian gave her increasingly complex assignments, and each time she rose to the challenge with a quiet determination that impressed even him. When Mercer Capital finally offered her a full-time remote position, Clare cried not out of fear this time, but out of gratitude. A steady income meant she could move out of the shelter. She found a small studio apartment in Queens. It wasn't much peeling paint, thin walls, noisy neighbors, but it was hers. A place where she could breathe without feeling watched or judged. She bought a crib for her son with her first paycheck, built it slowly, screw by screw, whispering promises to him the whole time. At work, news traveled fast among the analysts. Rumors spread about the mystery woman Julian was mentoring personally. Some doubted her talent, others respected her instantly. Clare didn't care either way. She focused on mastering her craft, financial forensics, risk evaluation, asset mapping. She read thick textbooks at 2 a.m., rocked her son to sleep with one hand while reviewing contracts with the other. Her confidence grew. Her posture changed. She walked differently, straighter, steadier, quieter, but more powerful. When she looked in the mirror now, she didn't see the girl Nathan discarded. She saw someone who fought her way out of the dark and refused to go back. Julian noticed. During a video conference one afternoon, he paused mid-sentence and studied her thoughtfully. "Clare, you ever consider moving into strategy instead of analysis? You think bigger than numbers." She flushed. "I'm not sure I'm ready." "I think you're already doing it," he replied. His faith in her did something Nathan never managed to do. It made her believe in her own potential. Clare accepted the promotion. Suddenly, she wasn't just analyzing data, she was advising on mergers, flagging risks, helping shape decisions worth millions. Her income doubled, then tripled. She hired a babysitter, enrolled in night classes, expanded her world in ways she once thought belonged only to other people. And every step forward pulled her farther from the woman Nathan had underestimated and closer to the woman he would one day fear. Because the more power she gained, the more exposed his collapsing empire became. And the day was coming when Clare would uncover something about Nathan so devastating it would change the game entirely. Life has a way of testing people right when they think they're finally catching their breath. For months, Clare had been rising steadily, new job, new confidence, new future. Her son, little Aiden, was growing strong and smiling more each day. It felt like the universe was finally giving her a chance to live rather than just survive. But storms don't ask for permission. It happened on a cold Tuesday morning. Clare had barely slept, staying up late to finish a presentation for Julian's team. She walked into Aiden's room to wake him for daycare, humming softly like she always did. But something felt wrong. Too still, too quiet. When she touched his forehead, her breath caught. He was burning hot. Panic sliced through her. She scooped him into her arms, whispering his name over and over. At the clinic, the minutes crawled like hours as she paced the waiting room, her heart punching against her ribs. She wasn't scared of illness, she was scared of facing it alone. The doctor finally called her in. "His fever is dangerously high. We need to run more tests." Clare's knees nearly buckled. The room blurred at the edges. She clutched Aiden's tiny hand, willing strength into him. She had fought so hard to protect him, and now he lay there helpless, fighting something she couldn't see. After what felt like forever, the doctor returned. "He's stable for now," he said gently, "but he'll need a specialist. The treatment is expensive, and the waiting list is long." Expensive. Those words stabbed her like knives. Clare had some savings thanks to Mercer Capital, but not enough for what the doctor was implying. Not enough for uncertainty. Not enough for a mother's terror. As she sat beside Aiden's hospital bed, her hands trembling, she couldn't help remembering how Nathan used to say she wouldn't survive without him. How he mocked her dreams, her efforts, her heart. She wondered if he would even care that his son was sick. She doubted it. But Clare didn't crumble. She wiped her tears, straightened her shoulders, and whispered to Aiden, "I will fix this. I don't know how yet, but I will." Minutes later, Her phone buzzed. It was Julian. "Claire," he said, voice steady. "I heard what happened. I'm on my way. Just stay with your son. Let me handle everything else." And for the first time in her life, someone was coming to help without asking anything in return. But what Claire didn't know was that Aiden's medical file would reveal something that pointed straight back to Nathan and threaten everything she had built. If there's one thing life teaches you, it's to pay attention to who shows up when everything is falling apart. Most people disappear. Some pretend not to notice. But a rare few step forward with a quiet strength that steadies your shaking world. For Claire, that person was Julian Mercer. He arrived at the hospital within the hour. No entourage, no noise, no billionaire theatrics. Just a man in a dark coat, carrying a calm that reached Claire before he even stepped into the room. Aiden lay in the crib beside her, hooked up to monitors, his tiny chest rising and falling in fragile rhythms. Julian pulled up a chair. "How is he?" Claire tried to speak, but her voice cracked. "They said he needs a specialist. You don't need to explain." Julian's tone was firm but warm. "I've already arranged everything. A pediatric cardiologist from Mount Sinai is reviewing his case now." She stared at him, stunned. "Julian, I can't let you." "Claire," he interrupted gently, "let me help. Not because you owe me, not because you work for me. Because you're family now. And so is he." She hadn't expected those words. They softened something inside her she had kept tightly guarded for so long. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was fighting alone. While Aiden slept, Julian reviewed the medical report on his tablet, brows furrowing. "There's something unusual in the notes. Did the first doctor mention this?" She shook her head. "No." "Why?" Julian hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "There's a genetic marker here, one that suggests a pre-existing condition from the father's side." Claire felt the air leave her lungs. "From Nathan? It appears that way." Of all the things she expected to battle, bills, treatment plans, legal papers, Nathan's shadow was the last thing she wanted near her child. And yet here it was, written into Aiden's blood. But Julian leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Listen to me, this doesn't define your son, and it doesn't give Nathan any rights he hasn't earned. You have fought for this child every single day. That matters." Tears gathered in Claire's eyes, not from fear, but from the startling realization that someone finally stood on her side with no conditions, no expectations, no hidden motives. "Thank you," she whispered. Julian gave her a small smile. "Get some rest. Tomorrow, we fight this together." It should have been a peaceful night after that, but fate had other plans. Because the next morning, someone unexpected showed up at the hospital, someone who had no right to be there. Some transformations are loud makeovers, grand entrances, applause. But Clare Whitford's transformation happened in the quiet moments, shaped by fear, love, and relentless determination. While Aiden rested under the careful watch of specialists Julian arranged, Claire found herself shifting into someone she never imagined she could become. The hospital window reflected her face, one evening exhausted, yes, but firmer. Older, maybe, but wiser too. Her shoulders no longer curled inward like they were protecting a wound. She stood straighter now, grounded by the truth that she had kept her son alive with nothing but willpower and a heart that refused to quit. Julian noticed it as well. "Do you realize," he said one night, reviewing strategy reports she'd written from Aiden's bedside, "that half the decisions my team approved this month came from your recommendations?" Claire blinked. "They did? You're not just good, Claire. You're exceptional." Hearing those words from a man like Julian Mercer did something Nathan never managed to do. It reshaped the way she saw herself. Not as someone surviving, but as someone rising. Her wardrobe changed slowly. A navy blazer she bought secondhand, a clean white blouse. Hair pulled back neatly. She didn't look wealthy. She looked capable, sharp, grounded. She walked into Mercer Capital's offices for the first time, not as a desperate single mother, but as an asset. People turned when she entered conference rooms. Analysts whispered. Executives took notes when she spoke. It wasn't glamour. It wasn't power for its own sake. It was competence. It was respect. And it was earned. One afternoon, Julian brought her into a private boardroom with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. The skyline glittered beneath a winter sun. "I've been thinking," Julian said, hands clasped. "You shouldn't stay in the background." I want you to lead a new strategic risk division. The role is yours if you want it. Claire swallowed hard. Julian, that's a senior position. I don't know if— You do know, he interrupted gently. You've been doing the work for months. Let the title match the reality. For a woman once thrown out into the cold with nothing but a baby in her belly, the moment felt surreal. She wasn't pretending to belong anymore. She belonged. And as she accepted the offer, she felt something powerful bloom in her chest. Not pride, not victory, but freedom. But destiny rarely allows peace to last long. Because the next day, just as Claire prepared to step into her new role, a name appeared on her phone screen. Nathan Cole. Calling her. And he wasn't calling to apologize, he was calling because he needed her. When Claire saw Nathan's name glowing on her phone, her stomach tightened, not from longing, but from an instinctive recoil. This was the man who'd shoved her out into the cold while she was pregnant. The man who'd mocked her dreams. The man who'd told her she'd never survive without him. Now he was calling her. Curiosity won. She answered. Claire, Nathan said, breathless, like he'd run a mile. I really need to talk to you. His voice wasn't the one she remembered. Gone was the smug confidence. Gone the smooth, upward-tilted tone he used when he felt superior. This voice sounded frayed, pulled apart by panic. Make it quick, Claire replied coolly. There was a beat of silence he hadn't expected her to sound strong. I think someone sabotaged our financials, he said. Mercer Capital, your firm, they're reviewing us. They're tearing everything apart. I'm being blamed for the discrepancies. Claire kept her tone flat. Maybe because you caused them. That's not fair, Nathan snapped, slipping into old habits. But then he quickly softened. Look, things got messy. Mistakes were made. But I shouldn't have pushed you away. I shouldn't have let Elena influence me. And there it was, the rewrite of history. The story where he was confused, misguided, pressured. The story where Claire was supposed to forgive him. She didn't. Nathan, what do you want? She asked. He hesitated. I want to make things right. Maybe we could talk about us. Claire almost laughed, not out of humor, but disbelief. 6 years ago, she'd have given anything to hear those words. Now they felt pathetic. You don't want me, she said quietly. You want stability. You want a lifeline. That's not true, Nathan said quickly. Too quickly. Claire closed her eyes, remembering the night he slammed the door on her, the cold biting her skin, the terrified heartbeat inside her belly. Remembering that he didn't care then. Not one bit. I'm not coming back, she said. Nathan's voice cracked. Claire, please, my job is on the line. Mercer's people are digging into everything. She froze. He didn't know. He didn't know she was Mercer's people. Nathan kept talking, oblivious to the storm, just inches from his throat. If you could just talk to someone at the firm for me, put in a word. Claire's heart went still. He wanted her to save him. The same man who left her with nothing. I can't help you, she said. And I wouldn't, even if I could. Nathan exhaled shakily, anger leaking through his fear. You'll regret this, Claire. You think you're safe, but you're not. I'll find a way back. He hung up. Claire stared at her phone, pulse steady, unshaken. He had no idea how much power she truly held. And the next morning, Claire would walk into a meeting that sealed Nathan's fate, and he had no clue she would be there. The following morning, Claire dressed with a steadiness she didn't fully feel. A soft cream blouse, tailored black pants, hair pulled back neatly. She didn't look like the girl Nathan abandoned. She looked like someone who had learned how to exist in powerful rooms. Someone who belonged inside skyscrapers, not outside their doors. Julian had called her late the night before, asking her to join a confidential evaluation meeting. Your insight will be important, he said simply. He didn't explain further, but Claire didn't need more. She trusted him. More than that, she trusted herself now. When she arrived at Mercer Capital's Midtown office, the atmosphere felt charged anticipation humming through the halls. Executives whispered in corners, phones rang nonstop, assistants hurried by, with folders pressed tightly to their chests. Something big was unfolding. Julian met her outside the conference room. You prepared? He asked. As I'll ever be. He gave her a nod of quiet confidence, then opened the door. Inside sat several Mercer board members, and directly across from them, pale and rigid in his chair, Nathan. For a moment, the world narrowed to a pinpoint. Claire inhaled slowly, grounding herself. She expected shock on his face, maybe guilt, maybe shame. Instead, the emotion that flickered through his eyes was pure, unfiltered fear. He stood abruptly. "Clare? What are you doing here?" Julian answered before she could. "Miss Whitford is the lead analyst who uncovered the discrepancies in your firm's records." Nathan stared at her as if she were a stranger wearing her face. "You?" he whispered. "You did this?" Clare didn't flinch. "I did my job." The board began questioning Nathan about the manipulated reports, the false vendor expenses, the inaccurate projections. He stumbled through excuses, contradictions, half-truths. Elena's name slipped out once, and Clare didn't miss the way his voice trembled when it did. At one point, he looked at Clare again, desperation clawing its way back into his tone. "Clare, tell them I wouldn't do something like this on purpose. You know me." She met his gaze coolly. "I used to know you." Nathan swallowed hard, panic visibly rising. He realized too late that Clare wasn't his escape route. She wasn't the woman he could guilt or manipulate into saving him. She was the one who exposed him. Julian continued the questioning, his tone firm, professional, merciless. Nathan's answers grew weaker. Sweat gathered at his temples. His empire, the one he thought he built alone, was cracking under the weight of truth. And Clare watched, steady and silent, not with vengeance, but with clarity. Because this wasn't revenge. This was consequence. And just when Nathan thought things couldn't get worse, the conference room door opened, and Elena Pierce walked in with her own agenda. Elena Pierce entering that conference room was like watching a fuse meet fire. Nathan's shoulders stiffened, his jaw clenched, and for the first time since the meeting began, he looked genuinely afraid. Elena didn't walk in quietly. She entered with heels clicking, chin lifted, confidence dripping off her like perfume. "Sorry I'm late," she said, sliding into a chair beside the board members, not beside Nathan. That detail alone shifted the entire room's energy. Nathan stared at her, stunned. "Elena, what are you doing?" She didn't even look at him. Answering their request for full cooperation, Julian nodded politely. "Miss Pierce has provided us with documents your firm didn't include." Nathan jolted. "Elena, what documents?" "You said..." She finally met his eyes, and her expression was cold enough to freeze steel. "Nathan, you said a lot of things." And then she began. She opened her folder and slid papers across the table, emails, expense approvals, invoices with Nathan's signature. Clare recognized some of the patterns immediately. These were the missing puzzle pieces she never had access to. The board members murmured, flipping pages. Nathan's voice cracked. "Elena, why are you doing this? I thought we were a team." "We were," she said, leaning back casually, "until your sinking ship became a liability. I'm not going down with you." It was brutal, efficient, almost elegant. Clare watched silently, not with joy, not even with revenge, but with the quiet understanding that the universe sometimes writes its own justice. Nathan turned to Clare like she was his last lifeline. "Please, tell them I wasn't trying to hide anything. You know, I'm not dishonest." Clare's voice was calm, steady. "Nathan, everything here speaks for itself." Elena folded her arms. He falsified reports to impress potential investors. He wanted to look bigger than he was. She paused, smirking. Classic Nathan, always chasing the lifestyle instead of doing the work. He flinched. "You used me." Elena raised an eyebrow. "You used everyone." The board pressed Nathan further, and his answers grew desperate, incoherent. This was the moment he realized he had no allies left, not in the company, not with Elena, and certainly not with Clare. As he sank into his chair, defeated, Elena straightened her blazer and turned to Julian. "If you need further testimony, I'm available." Julian thanked her professionally, though Clare caught the faintest shift in his expression, recognition of a woman who would burn anything to save herself. But as Elena stood to leave, she glanced at Clare. There was no triumph in her eyes, just calculation. Because Elena wasn't finished yet. She had one more secret, and she intended to use it against both Nathan and Clare. Elena's threat lingered in the air long after she left the conference room, a chilling reminder that she wasn't finished playing her game. But while Nathan spiraled into panic, Clare remained steady. She had learned long ago that panic never saved anyone, least of all a mother fighting to build a future. The next days moved quickly. Julian's team completed their investigation, and Nathan's firm collapsed under the weight of its own fraud. Nathan tried calling Claire again, leaving rambling voicemails about misunderstandings, second chances, the family they could still be. She didn't answer a single one. Claire was done letting ghosts pull at her. Instead, she focused on Aiden's recovery. With Julian covering the specialist's care, Aiden improved faster than expected. His laugh, small but bright, returned to the hospital room like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Every smile reminded Claire why she endured everything, why she fought harder than anyone realized. Then came the day Julian asked her to fly to Los Angeles with him for a major acquisition meeting. "You've become essential to this decision," he told her. "I want you there." Claire hesitated. "What about Aiden?" "He's coming too," Julian said simply. "This isn't just a work trip. It's protection. It's opportunity. And you deserve to be in the room where your future is discussed." So, that morning, Claire arrived at the private terminal wearing a soft gray coat and a confidence that felt entirely new. Aiden slept peacefully in her arms. The sunlight hit her at an angle that made her look almost ethereal, like the woman she was always meant to become had finally stepped forward. The Mercer jet gleamed on the tarmac, polished, powerful, waiting for her. Staff greeted her by name. Julian, already aboard, waved her in with the warmth of someone welcoming family. But destiny wasn't done twisting, because as Claire prepared to board, another car pulled up to the terminal. A battered sedan, one she recognized instantly. Nathan stepped out. He looked nothing like the man who once held her future in his hands, disheveled, shaken, almost hollow. And the moment he saw Claire standing beside a billionaire's jet, his entire world visibly caved. "Claire?" he whispered, like a man seeing a ghost. What is this? What are you doing here?" For the first time in years, Claire felt no fear when looking at him. Only resolve. She shifted Aiden in her arms, lifting her chin as the jet engines hummed behind her. And Nathan finally realized he hadn't just lost control, he'd lost her. But before Claire could step onto the jet, Nathan said something that froze the entire runway and forced her to confront a truth she never wanted to hear. "Claire, he's my son, isn't he?" Nathan's voice cracked across the runway like a broken promise. For a moment, the sounds around them, the engines, the footsteps, the wind seemed to vanish. Claire froze mid-step, Aiden stirring slightly against her shoulder. This was the moment she had spent 6 years preparing for, yet dreading all the same. She turned slowly. "You lost the right to ask that." But Nathan wasn't listening. His eyes were fixed on Aiden, not with love, not even with recognition, but with dawning panic. The kind of fear only a man with everything to lose could feel. "Claire, please," he whispered, stepping closer. "If he's mine, I can fix this. My lawyers—" "There it is," she cut in sharply. "You don't want him because you care. You want him because he benefits you." Nathan flinched. "That's not true." "It's completely true," Claire said, her voice steady. "If Mercer Capital finishes its report, you'll be blacklisted from every firm on the East Coast. A custody claim would make you look stable, redeemable." Nathan opened his mouth, but no words came out. "And you think," Claire continued, "that the child you abandoned would be your solution?" For a second, his mask slipped. The desperation beneath it was naked, trembling, ugly. "Claire, don't do this. I need him. I need—" "No," she said. "You need power, and you think he's your way back." Julian appeared at the top of the jet's stairs, watching the scene below with calm intensity. Staff waited, uncertain whether to intervene. Nathan tried again, reaching out. "Claire, I made mistakes, but I loved you." She shook her head. "You loved who you were when you stood next to me, not me." His face twisted, not in remorse, but in frustration. The realization was finally hitting him. The woman he once controlled, the woman he once weakened, no longer existed. "You're making a mistake," he hissed, his voice trembling with the last scraps of pride. "You think you're above me now? You think standing next to some billionaire makes you untouchable?" Claire stepped forward, the wind lifting a strand of her hair. "I don't need anyone to make me untouchable. I survived you. That was enough." Nathan swallowed hard, his voice falling apart. "You can't walk away, not now." But she already had. Claire turned, adjusting Aiden in her arms, and climbed the jet's stairs. Julian reached out and took her free hand, not possessively, but supportively, grounding her in the moment she had earned. Below them, Nathan stood alone on the runway, small beneath the shadow of the gleaming jet. As the door closed, he shouted one last fractured plea, and what he screamed in desperation was so shocking, so reckless, it forced Clare to confront a choice she never imagined she would face. The last words Nathan screamed before the jet door sealed were wild, frantic, the cries of a man drowning in the consequences he created. "I'll take you to court. I'll take the boy. I'll ruin you, Clare." For a heartbeat, the threat echoed inside her chest. It was the one fear she had carried for 6 years, that he would someday try to rip her child away. But then the engines roared to life, the ground fell away beneath them, and Julian's calm voice grounded her like a lifeline. "He can't take what he never protected," Julian said quietly. "And he has no case. Not anymore." Up in the clouds, for the first time in years, Clare let her shoulders fall. She looked down at Aiden, sleeping peacefully in her arms. He didn't know he had just escaped the man who would have used him as a shield. He didn't know his future had just shifted towards safety, towards stability, towards something brighter than she had ever dared imagine. The meeting in Los Angeles went flawlessly. With Clare leading strategy, Mercer Capital secured one of the biggest acquisitions of the decade. Executives who once overlooked her now treated her with a level of respect that made her heart tremble. She wasn't just part of the conversation, she was steering it. Later that evening, in the soft glow of a Beverly Hills terrace, Julian approached her. He wasn't the billionaire CEO now. He wasn't her boss. He was simply the man who had stood by her when she had nothing but a child and a trembling future. "You changed us," he said gently. "You changed me. And I don't just mean professionally." Clare felt warmth rise in her cheeks. "Julian." He offered his hand, not forcefully, not expecting anything, simply inviting. "Whatever comes next, you won't face it alone. If you want that." And for the first time since the night she was thrown out into the cold, Clare allowed herself to imagine a life built not from survival, but from choice, from partnership, from something deeper than broken promises. She took his hand. Word of Nathan's downfall spread quickly. He was fired, investigated, abandoned by Elena, and blacklisted across the industry. Every bridge he burned had finally caught up with him. He had chased status, image, and shortcuts, only to end exactly where his behavior always pointed: alone, powerless, and irrelevant. Meanwhile, Clare stood in her new life, strong, fulfilled, loved, and knew she had earned every step of it. And if there's one lesson her journey leaves behind, it's this: when someone throws you away, it's not a judgment of your worth. It's a preview of their own ending. All right, my wonderful friends. The story ends here, but you and I were still sitting together in this moment. And if you're truly still here right now, it means something in Clare's journey touched a quiet place inside you. So let's breathe together for a second and look at what this story is really telling us. Life won't always be gentle. Sometimes it pushes you out into the cold, just like Clare. But as the Stoics remind us, the obstacle is the way. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What stands in the way becomes the way." And that's exactly what Clare lived. Every setback became the doorway to something stronger. We learn that being thrown away doesn't mean you're worthless. It means you're being redirected. That healing isn't loud. It happens quietly on late nights, in small decisions, in moments where you refuse to give up. And most importantly, you don't need anyone's permission to rise again. Your future doesn't belong to someone who hurt you. It belongs to the version of you who chooses to keep going. So if you're here, listening to this, maybe a part of you is also rising. Maybe you're healing too. And hey, if this story moved you, if it made you feel seen, understood, or just a little stronger, don't leave quietly. Like the video, share it with someone who needs this reminder, and subscribe to the channel so we can keep walking these journeys together. You're not alone, and your comeback story, it's already beginning.